The air in the Galactic Concord's central archive was always cool, clean, and smelled faintly of ozone. It was a place of absolute quiet, where the history of 1,000 species was stored not in messy books, but in shimmering data crystals and silent holograms. Kim J moved through the towering aisles of light, a small figure in a simple gray uniform. To his colleagues, the elegant, long-limbed Therians, the humming, insectoid Kegir, he was a polite curiosity. A human, a young species, known for their artistic flair and their frustrating physical fragility. Their planet, Earth, was a backwater, quarantined long ago after some forgotten minor conflict. Its history before the Concorde was a blank spot, lost in what was officially called the Great Data Collapse. Jay didn't mind the quiet work. It was better than the alternative. Back on Earth, in Seoul, his family lived in a comfortable, controlled society. The Concorde provided everything: food, medicine, climate stability. In return, they asked for peace and compliance. Jay had always been good at compliance. His job was to catalog donations from deceased explorers, sorting fragments of the past for the Concorde's official records. Today's collection was from a derelict probe found drifting near the fringe. It was a standard assignment. Jay sat at his console, his fingers gliding over the interface, pulling up holographic images of broken pottery, rusted tools, and cracked tablets. He tagged them, logged them, and moved on. It was mindless, peaceful work. Then he opened container 776. Inside was a single object, resting on a bed of disintegrated foam. It was a data crystal, but unlike any he'd seen. Concorde crystals were smooth, blue, and standardized. This one was angular, milky white, and scarred from micrometeorite impacts. A small physical label was affixed to its base, the letters faded but clear in an archaic form of English. Asterisk Project Aegis. Final report. Authorization. Admiral Lee G-Hoon. J froze. The name Lee Ji-hoon was unmistakably human. Korean, like his own. But no human had held a military title like Admiral in over 5 centuries. Not since the Concorde's peaceful integration. A prickle of something not quite excitement, more like unease, ran down his spine. He glanced around. The archive was empty. He carefully placed the crystal into his reader. The machine whirred, its light scanning the object. A prompt flashed on his screen in stark red glyphs. Asterisk, asterisk, genetic authentication required. Security protocol. Sol Prime. Asterisk, asterisk, Sol. Earth Star. His heart thumped once, hard, against his ribs. This was not a Concorde system. This was something older. He looked at the small, nearly painless lancet attached to every console for biometric logs. He pressed his thumb to it. A pinprick, a drop of blood absorbed by the machine. The reader screen went black for 3 long seconds. Then it erupted with light. A complex, 3-dimensional star map filled the air above Jay's desk. It was centered on Sol, but it didn't show the familiar planets. Instead, it showed a dense, intricate web of tiny, pulsing icons scattered in the deep cold of the system's outer reaches. In the Oort cloud, each icon was tagged with strings of code and symbols he didn't recognize. In the center of the display, 2 words burned with a steady: Amber Light, Terra Invicta, Latin, Unconquered Earth. Before Jay could draw a breath to process this, before he could even think to save the data, the main archive holoscreen on the far wall flickered and switched from the gentle, rotating Concorde emblem to a frantic news feed. A stern-faced Therian announcer was speaking, her voice tight with controlled panic. Confirmed. The Helios Nexus, a major border outpost in the Cygnus sector, has come under direct and unprovoked attack. Initial reports indicate the aggressors are forces of the Raskar Alliance. Communication is fragmented. The Concord Council is convening an emergency session. The image switched to grainy, shaking footage. Jay saw the sleek, organic curves of Concord architecture lit by the violent flash of plasma beams. He saw dark, jagged Rasker assault ships, like angry thorns, piercing the station's hull. It was chaos. It was war. A concept so alien to his life, it felt like watching a myth dot as he stared. A secondary, smaller schematic appeared on his personal screen, overlaying the frantic news feed. It was the soul map from the crystal. One of the tiny, pulsing icons in the Oort cloud, previously amber, had turned a solid, deep crimson. A line of text scrolled beneath it in the same archaic font. Asterisk, asterisk, passive alert status elevated. Signature analysis of hostile energy weapons initiated. Threat database cross-referencing. Standby. Asterisk, asterisk, Jay jerked back from his console as if it had burned him. The crystal's map was reacting. In real time. To an attack happening hundreds of light years away, the archive door hissed open. His supervisor, Kellis, glided in. Khalees was Etherian, their features serene and porcelain-like, but now their large, dark eyes were wide with distress. Jay, you see the news? This is unprecedented. The Rasker, they have gone mad. Cullis's voice was a soft warble. They noticed Jay's pale face, the strange, glowing hologram still hovering over his workstation. What is that? Is that from the new collection? Jay's mouth was dry. He should report it. Show Keelis the crystal. That was the protocol. That was compliance. But the words on the screen, Terra Invicta, felt like a secret. His secret. A secret his people had forgotten. It's nothing, Jay heard himself say, his voice surprisingly steady. He waved a hand, closing the projection. The star map vanished, leaving only the frantic news feed. Just some old navigational charts. Corrupted data. Callis nodded absently, their attention already pulled back to the crisis on the screen. A terrible day. To think of violence on such a scale. It is good your people never knew such things, Jay. Your gentle history spared you that darkness. Jay forced a small, tight smile and nodded. Gentle history. The words echoed in his head as he looked down at the milky white crystal, now inert on his desk. His thumb still throbbed where the lancet had pricked it. The genetic key had been turned. Something had been unlocked. On the news feed, a Rasker commander, all sharp angles and cold, black eyes, appeared in a captured transmission. His voice was a guttural scrape translated into galactic common. He spoke of Concord weakness, of a new order. He ended with a declaration that would soon echo across every network in the galaxy. Your peace is a fantasy. The Rasker commander snarled. We have kicked open your temple door and found no gods within. In the quiet, cool archive, Kim Jay slowly wrapped his fingers around the ancient data crystal. It was warm to the touch. He looked from the raging war on the wall to the small, silent object in his hand. A terrible, impossible understanding began to dawn. The temple door. The sleeping gods. The Rasker had kicked the wrong door. The Helios Nexus Station was not built for screams. It was built for quiet diplomacy and gentle commerce, its corridors wide and graceful, its viewports showing the beautiful swirling nebula that was the station's namesake. Now, the screens were swallowed by a louder, more terrible sound, the shriek of tearing metal and the hiss of ruptured atmosphere. Park. Su Min slammed a fist against a buckling bulkhead door, sealing her and 5 other technicians in Maintenance Bay 7. The lights flickered, painting their terrified faces in strobes of red emergency glow. The station's calming, synthetic voice was still trying to give evacuation instructions, now cut with bursts of static and the harsh, untranslated barks of Rasker battle speech over the open comms. Report. What do we have? Su Min yelled, her voice cutting through the panic. She was an aerospace engineer, her hands usually busy with stress tolerances and thruster calibrations. Now they were smeared with coolant and something darker. One of the younger techs, a human man named Choi, stammered, "Primary power is gone. Life support on this sector is failing. They're in the main concourse. They just, he couldn't finish. They had all seen it on the internal feeds before they went dark. The Rasker boarding pods had slammed into the station like spears. The invaders themselves were nightmares of deliberate design tall, with chitinous black armor that seemed to drink the light, and limbs that ended in vicious, blade-like appendages. They didn't use standard plasma rifles. They used weapons that fired shards of crystalline violence that pierced Concord, shielding like it was paper. The worst was the broadcast. It played on a loop, overriding the station systems. Commander Velm of the Rasker Alliance, his face a mask of cold superiority, delivered his terms. Surrender, disarmament, subjugation. His final words were etched into Su Min's mind. Your peace is a fantasy. We have kicked open your temple door and found no gods within. A thunderous impact shook the bay door. Something heavy was on the other side, pounding, methodical, unhurried. We can't stay here, Su Min said, her mind racing past the fear into a cold, technical space. She looked at the bay's main console, its screens dead, but her eyes fell on a secondary panel, an older piece of hardware mounted on the wall. It was a comms relay, a beautiful, intricate piece of sculpted bronze and gold wire. A plaque beneath it read, Asterisk, gift from the people of Earth, a replica of humanity's first interstellar communicator. A symbol of connection. Asterisk, it was art, a museum piece the Concorde had installed to celebrate cultural diversity. A useless, sentimental antique. Another boom on the door. A dent appeared in the metal. Su Min's pragmatism took over. Sentimental or not, it was a piece of comms equipment. It had power leads. It had a transmission node. Choi, help me get this panel off, she ordered, grabbing a multi-tool. But the main array is gone. That thing is just a toy, Choi cried, even as he scrambled to help. It's a transmitter with a direct hard line to the station's central conduit. Su Min snapped, prying at the plating. If we can feed it power, we can maybe piggyback a distress signal on its maintenance frequency. It's a 1 in a million shot, but it's the only shot. The door groaned. A sharp, blade-like tip began to pierce through. Su Min's fingers worked furiously, bypassing safeties, rerouting the last dregs of the bay's backup battery into the ancient relay. The delicate gold filaments inside glowed with a warm, gentle light. The console screen fizzed to life, showing only a simple, scrolling line of green text and old-fashioned text-only interface. It was waiting for a command. A final, catastrophic blow shattered the locking mechanism. The bay door slid open a foot, then jammed. In the gap, the hulking, shadowy form of a Rasker warrior filled the space. Its sensory cluster glowed a malevolent red, scanning the cowering humans. It made a sound, a grinding click that might have been laughter. It reached a bladed limb through the gap, not to attack, but to grasp the door. With terrifying, effortless strength, it began to pull, the screech of metal drowning out the human's cries. Su Min's hands flew over the relay's manual keypad. There was no time for a coded message. She typed the simplest, most powerful string she could think of, the Universal Concorde distress code, followed by their sector coordinates. Her finger hovered over the transmit key. In that frozen second, the Rasker warrior fully yanked the broken door aside. It stepped into the bay. At the same moment, a Concorde liaison, a slender Therian named Elria, whom Su Min knew from engineering briefings, stumbled into the corridor behind it, clutching a bleeding wound. The Rasker warrior turned, almost casually. It didn't fire its weapon. It simply backhanded the Therian with its armored limb. There was a sickening, wet crunch. Elria fell to the deck, motionless. A demonstration. A message of pure, contemptuous power. The warrior turned its glowing gaze back to Su Min. She slammed her hand down on the transmit key, but the relay didn't send her distress call. Instead, the screen filled with a rapid torrent of white code. A synthetic, calm voice, utterly unlike the station's, emanated from the small speaker. ***, signal analysis engaged. Threat pattern recognized. Crystalline harmonic weapon signature confirmed. Source, Rasker Alliance. Cross-referencing with protected memory. ***, the Rasker warrior took a step forward. Raising its blade, the relay screen flashed once, then displayed a single, pulsating symbol, a stylized T and I woven together, the same Terra Invicta glyph Kim J had seen. The voice spoke again, final and ***, priority Omega signal authenticated. Relaying to Sol primary. Activating dormant protocols. ***, the relay went dark, its gold filaments cooling. Su Min stared, empty-handed. Her gambit had failed. The antique had just babbled nonsense and died. The Rasker warrior lunged suddenly. Every light in the bay, the red emergency strips, the dead console screens, even the indicator lights on the technician's tools flared a blinding, pure white. A deep subsonic hum vibrated through the deck, through their bones. The Rasker warrior stumbled, not from attack, but from a sudden, overwhelming sensor feedback. It clutched its sensory cluster, emitting a pained screech. Outside the shattered bay, down the corridor, across the whole of the ravaged Helios nexus, the same thing happened. Every power source, every system, flared and surged for one impossible second. Across the entire Cygnus sector, every ship, every listening post, experienced a momentary, inexplicable power fluctuation. A blink, a whisper dot, and then it was over. The lights in the bay returned to their dim red flicker. The hum faded. The Rasker warrior shook its head, recovered, its fury now incandescent. It focused on Su Min, who stood defenseless before it. But something had changed. Su Min didn't know what. She didn't understand the words from the relay. But she had seen the warrior flinch. She had felt that hum in her chest. It hadn't felt like a failure. It had felt like an answer dot. As the warrior raised its blade for the killing strike, Su Min didn't close her eyes. She stared back, a spark of defiant, illogical hope cutting through her terror. The temple door had been kicked in, but for the first time, she wondered if something inside had finally slowly opened its eyes. The central archive felt like a tomb. The news feeds played the same loop of destruction from Helios Nexus, but the sound was muted. The silence among the rows of data crystals was heavier. Kim J sat at his station, the milky white crystal hidden in a fold of his tunic, pressed against his skin. It was still warm. He should have given it to Kellis. He knew that. Every rule, every instinct of his peaceful life screamed at him to hand it over to the Concord authorities. But the words Terra Invicta pulsed in his mind like a second heartbeat. It was a piece of his own history, a history the Concord said was lost, a history that was clearly, terrifyingly, not what he had been told. He waited until his shift ended and the other archivists had left, their faces drawn with worry over the galactic news. He waited until he was alone in the quiet, blue-lit expanse. Then, with shaking hands, he reinserted the crystal into his private reader. The star map of Sol blossomed again. The single crimson icon still pulsed in the Orc cloud. Jay took a deep breath. He wasn't a soldier or a spy. He was a librarian. So, he would do what a librarian does. He would research. He bypassed the main Concord historical database. That was the official story, the one that called humanity's past a gentle prelude. Instead, he went into the raw, uncurated logs, personal diaries of early human colonists. Fragmentary data from derelict ships, old medical reports. The kind of data no one bothered to clean up or censor because it was considered meaningless. He searched for Terra Invicta. No results. He searched for Admiral Lee Ji Hoon. No results. He leaned back, frustration growing. Then he tried a different path. He searched for human myths, folklore from the first colonies. Stories told by grandparents who remembered Earth. The fragments began to appear, scattered and dismissed as primitive superstition in their archival notes. A log from a miner on Proxima Centauri b, dated 2 centuries after integration. Asterisk, the kids keep having nightmares. They say the quiet soldiers in the dark between stars are talking again. It's just the radiation messing with the hull, I tell them. But my old gran used to tell stories. Said Earth didn't join the galaxy. It ended a war so big we had to forget it to live with ourselves. She called it the Silent Guard. Crazy talk. Asterisk, a snippet from a psychologist's report on a generation ship that arrived late. Asterisk, collective anxiety centered on perceived watchfulness from outer system. No evidence of external threats. Likely a cultural trauma response to the isolation of generation travel, manifesting as a belief in protective but unseen entities. Recommend cultural assimilation therapy. Asterisk, Jay's skin crawled. The Silent Guard. Sleeping soldiers. Watchfulness from the outer system. He cross-referenced these fragments with the star map. The pulsing icons were not random. They formed a perfect, multi-layered sphere around the Sol system. A guard sphere. A defensive network. His console chimed. An incoming message, flagged as urgent. It was from Kellis. Jay, please come to the liaison office immediately. The council has requested clarification on some things. The words were polite, but the tone was strained. Fear, cold and sharp, dripped down Jay's spine. The Concord was looking for answers, and his unauthorized research might have just triggered an alert somewhere in the system. He quickly shut down the reader, palming the Aegis crystal. He thought about running, but to where? He was light years from Earth, surrounded by a civilization that now felt like a fragile facade. He walked to the liaison office, the crystal a burning secret in his hand. The door slid open. Inside, Kellis was not alone. A tall, severe-looking Therian in the silver robes of a Concord High Auditor stood by the window, gazing at the stars. The room was tense. Kim J., Kellis said, their voice unusually formal. This is High Auditor Niall. He has questions about the disturbance. Disturbance? Jay asked, forcing calm. A sector-wide energy pulse, Niall said, turning. His eyes were like dark mirrors. Originated approximately 90 minutes ago, centered on the Helios Nexus. It coincided with the final Rasker assault. It was not a weapon. It was a signal. A signal of immense, archaic power, broadcast on a carrier wave we haven't seen in millennia. He took a step closer. Our trace algorithms indicate the signal's authentication path ran through a piece of non-Concord technology. A human artifact. On that station, Jay's mouth was dry. I don't know anything about that. Don't you? Niall said softly. He gestured, and a hologram appeared above his desk. It was the internal schematic of the Helios Nexus, highlighting Maintenance Bay 7. A specific component glowed the old human communications relay. This object activated. It received the Rasker's weapon signatures and the station's own panic. And it sent a message. Not to us, not a distress call. It sent a priority Omega signal directly to your home system. To Sol. Noel's gaze was a physical weight. The Concord has no record of a priority Omega protocol. Our records of human technological capability before integration are blank, deliberately so, by ancient treaty. A treaty your people signed. He paused. What did they agree to forget, Kim J? And what has that signal just woken up? Jay felt the edges of the crystal digging into his palm. He saw the fear behind Niall's stern face. It wasn't the fear of a superior looking down on an inferior. It was the fear of someone standing on what they thought was solid ground, only to feel it tremble with the movement of something vast and ancient sleeping beneath. I don't know what they forgot, Jay said, and it was mostly true. But he held up his hand, opening his fingers to reveal the milky white crystal. But I think this can tell us. Both Kellis and Noel stared at the unassuming object. What is it? Kellis whispered. A key, Jay said. A report. From an Admiral Lee Ji Hoon. He placed it on the table. It requires a human genetic signature to activate. It showed me a map of a defense network around Sol. It calls itself Terra Invicta. Niall's composure cracked. A flicker of pure primal dread crossed his features. Terra Invicta. The words clearly meant something to him, something from the Concord's own sealed histories. Before anyone could speak, the entire station shuddered. It was not an explosion. It was a deep, resonant wave, as if a giant bell had been struck somewhere in the fabric of space itself. Every screen in the office, the news feeds, the architectural schematics, Niall's own datapad flickered and went black. Then, a single line of text, in the same stark, simple font from Jay's reader, appeared on every single surface. Asterisk, asterisk, priority Omega signal confirmed. Threat designation, Rasker Alliance. Deterrence protocol, Watchdog, is now active. Awaiting hostile action in Sol Primary for final authorization. Asterisk, asterisk, the message lingered for 10 silent seconds. Then the screens returned to normal. The news feed showed the same chaotic shots from Helios Nexus. The three of them stood frozen in the sudden, ordinary silence. The quiet was worse. NYL slowly turned from the screen to look at Jay, and then at the crystal. The fear in his eyes had solidified into something else, a horrified understanding. The signal had been sent. An answer had been received. Something was awake. The temple door, Noel breathed, quoting the Rasker taunt without irony. You didn't just find it empty. You knocked, and something just answered from inside. He looked at Jay with new, unsettling eyes. What are your people, Kim J? What did we let sleep on our border? Jay had no answer. He could only look at the crystal, its warmth now feeling like the heat from a recently fired gun. The sleeping god was not just stirring. It had opened one eye, and was now watching, waiting for the threat to come closer. The waiting, Jay realized, was the most terrifying part of all. The silence that followed the system-wide message was heavier than any alarm. In the liaison office, Kim J. Kellis and High Auditor Noel stood motionless, trapped in the echo of the words, asterisk awaiting hostile action in Sol, primary for final authorization. Asterisk, it was Noel who broke the spell. He moved to his console, his fingers flying across the interface with urgent precision. I am accessing deep-range strategic sensors. The Sol system is a quarantine zone, but we have passive monitoring platforms at the heliopause. They should show nothing. A holographic projection loomed in the center of the room. It showed the familiar yellow dot of Sol, the orbits of its inner planets, peaceful, quiet, dotted with the simple orbital habitats and traffic of a low-threat world. Earth was a serene blue and white marble. Nothing was out of place, Not then while zoomed out. Past the orbit of Neptune. Past Pluto. Into the deep, dark freeze of the Oort cloud. The screen erupted in light. Dozens, then hundreds of new signatures flickered into existence. They were not the warm, messy energy readings of human ships or stations. They were cold, precise, and impossibly efficient. They registered as mere whispers on the sensors, drawing power from sources the Concorde scanners could not even identify. Quantum vacuum fluctuations. Zero-point energy. Theoretical concepts. By the first light, Callus whispered, their melodic voice cracking. The signatures were moving. Not in random patrols, but in complex, interlocking patterns, forming layers of perfect defensive spheres around the sun. They were sleek, black schematics on the screen, shaped like arrows and crescents, and diamonds designs born from a school of warfare the galaxy had forgotten. They were beautiful, and they were utterly terrifying. On Earth, people went about their lives. A woman named Lee Hanna tended a hydroponic garden in a soul arcology, glancing at a news report about unrest in the outer sectors, with mild concern before focusing on her tomatoes. A man named Park Dae-young guided a tourist shuttle around the moon, pointing out the old Apollo landing sites, unaware that new, silent monuments were taking up positions just beyond his sight. The sky was calmed out in the void between Mars and Jupiter. Space rippled. A Rasker battle group, the Fist of Veln, dropped out of warp. It was a splinter force, sent by Commander Veln on a secondary objective, to secure the soft target of humanity's homeworld as a bargaining chip and a symbol of total conquest. 23 jagged, cruel-looking ships, their crystalline weapon arrays glowing with malevolent energy. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, Sub-Commodore Grax surveyed the peaceful human system on his screen. He saw the primitive orbital traffic, the undefended planet. He felt a surge of contempt. The Concorde's gods were indeed a myth. This would be a simple harvest. Target the largest orbital station around their moon, Grax ordered, his voice a dry rasp. A single warning shot. Let them see their fragility. Then broadcast our terms. A single coruscating beam of crystalline energy lanced out from the lead ship. It was designed to pierce, to shatter, to demonstrate technological supremacy. It streaked across the void, aiming not to destroy the lunar station, but to graze it, to tear a glowing scar of ruin across its side. The shot never landed. 100,000 kilometers from the moon, the beam simply vanished. It did not hit a shield. It did not dissipate. It ceased to exist. On the Rasker Bridge, alarms began to shriek. Grax leaned forward. What happened? Sensor malfunction? Negative Sub-Commodore? The energy signature. It was absorbed. At point of termination, we read a microscopic gravitational anomaly. And we have new contacts. Space around the Rasker fleet changed. It was not that ships decloaked or warped in. One moment, there was empty void. The next, the void was filled. Sleek, black vessels, their surfaces not reflecting light, but seeming to drink it, were simply there. They surrounded the Rasker fleet completely, their positions forming a perfect, inescapable kill sphere. They had no running lights, no obvious engines, no weapon ports. They were silent. They were motionless. Grax felt a cold he had never known. Identify them. Hail them. Before his communications officer could comply, a transmission flooded every Rasker and Concorde channel. It was not broadcast. It was implanted into their systems. A synthetic, calm, utterly emotionless voice spoke in perfect galactic common. Asterisk, asterisk, unauthorized hostile action detected in Sol Primary. Source, Rasker Alliance Vessel Fist of Veln. Terra Invicta Protocol active. Judgment, annihilation. Asterisk, asterisk, all ships. Grax screamed. Maximum firepower. Target the nearest. The human ships did not fire beams or missiles. They did not move. Space itself flexed dot around each Rasker ship. The fabric of reality twisted into a shimmering silver sphere. There was no sound in the vacuum. There was only light. A blinding, pure white light that consumed the Rasker vessels from the outside in. The crystalline alloys of their hulls, designed to withstand supernova, unraveled into harmless particles. Their weapons, their engines, their crews, all of it was silently, cleanly. Converted into light and dispersing heat dot, it took less than 3 seconds. 23. Spheres of light flashed in the darkness, beautiful and horrific. Then they faded, leaving behind not even wreckage. Just empty space, slightly warmer than the background void. On Earth, people looked up. The anomalous, beautiful auroras that suddenly painted the skies from pole to pole were a mystery, a stunning celestial event. They took pictures. They held their loved ones. They had no idea they were witnessing the afterglow of a divine execution. On the Concord Capital world, in the liaison office, the sensor feed showed the entire engagement. The warning shot vanishing. The black ships appearing. The silent, spherical erasure of the Rasker fleet. Kellis had sunk to their knees, a low, mournful hum escaping them. High Auditor Noil was as pale as marble, his hands gripping the edge of the console so tightly the material creaked. Kim J simply stared. He felt nothing at first, just a vast, hollow ringing in his mind. This was the silent guard. This was the sleeping soldier. It was not a protector that fought. It was a force that simply deleted. The violence was so absolute, so effortless, it transcended brutality and became something else. A natural law, a function of the universe. Thou shalt not trespass here. The holographic feed shifted. One of the black arrows, the largest, turned slowly. It did not aim at anything. It simply faced the general direction of the outer galaxy, where the Rasker home territories and the rest of the Concord lay. For a long moment it hung there, silent and dark. Then, across the system, the hundreds of other signatures began to move again. They retreated, not to their original positions, but to new, closer orbits. They formed a tighter, denser shell around the inner planets. And from each of them, and from dozens of hidden platforms on asteroids and dead moons, monolithic structures of black stone and shimmering energy unfolded. They were sentinels. They were WATCHTOWERS. The silent broadcast came again, one final time, on every channel. *** Sol primary is secured. Deterrence protocol watchdog remains active. Terra Invicta stands vigilant. ***, then, the black ships vanished. Not by warping away. They simply ceased to be there, as if they had been a collective hallucination. Only the new, ominous sentinels remained, humming with quiet power. The office was tomb silent. Noil finally turned to look at Jay. All the authority, all the superior understanding, was gone from his face. What remained was the raw, naked look of a child who has just seen the dark for what it truly is. Annihilation, Noil whispered, repeating the calm, synthetic word. Not defeat, not conquest. Annihilation. He looked from the screen showing peaceful, unknowing Earth to the human standing before him. You built a gardener to prune threats from your garden, and you forgot it was there. Jay found his voice, small and broken. We didn't just forget, he said, the truth of it crashing down on him as he watched the sentinels take up their new posts. We made ourselves forget. What kind of war? What kind of enemy? Makes you build that just to feel safe enough to sleep? The question hung in the air, more frightening than any weapon. The gods were not just awake. They had stretched, flexed a limb, and swatted a fly. And now they were watching the door, eyes wide open. The galaxy had just seen a glimpse of what lived inside the temple. The door could never be closed again. The silence in the aftermath was the loudest sound Kim Jae had ever heard. It wasn't just the quiet of the liaison office. It was the silence of a stunned galaxy. The Concord's networks, usually buzzing with 1,000 streams of data and discourse, had gone almost still, as if holding its breath. They came for him not long after, not with force, but with a stiff, terrified formality. A quartet of Concord peacekeepers escorted Jay from the archives. They did not touch him. They walked a careful 2 steps behind, as if he were radioactive. He was taken to a secure transit shuttle, then to a high-orbit station, and finally aboard a sleek Concorde diplomatic vessel. He was not placed in a cell, but in a spacious, comfortable cabin with a large viewport. It felt like being placed in a very nice cage. Park Soo-min was already there when he arrived. She stood by the viewport, her arms crossed, looking out at the stars. She had a healing cut on her forehead and a hollow look in her eyes. She turned as he entered, and for a moment they just stared. At each other, 2 ordinary humans caught in something unimaginable. They pulled me off the Nexus right after the pulse, she said, her voice rough. I've been answering questions for 2 days. They keep asking me about the relay, about what I felt. What did you tell them? Jay asked. I told them the truth, that it felt like a lock clicking open. A very old, very big lock. She nodded towards the door. They're scared, Jay. I've seen scared before. This is different. This is foundational fear. Like they've just found out the floor beneath the universe is gone. The door hissed open. High Auditor Noel entered, followed by Kellis, who looked smaller and more fragile than ever. With them was a new figure, Commander Velm of the Rasker Alliance. He was in restraint cuffs, his proud stature diminished, but his black eyes still burned with defiant fury. A holographic emitter in the center of the room flickered to life, projecting the images of the Concord High Council, a dozen different species, all wearing expressions of profound unease. The council head, an elder Therian, spoke first, her voice echoing in the cabin. This convocation is unprecedented. We are here to understand. Kim Jae, Park Soo-min, you will explain. Jay felt the weight of the galaxy's gaze. He saw the milky white Aegis crystal on a small table, brought from his quarters. He took a slow breath and stepped forward. He was a historian. He would present the evidence. The Concord records are wrong, he began, his voice gaining strength. Our history is not lost. It was buried by us. He activated the crystal. The star map of Sol appeared, the sentinels now clearly marked. This is not a weapon. It is a report, a receipt, for a war so terrible, so total, that the only way to move forward was to forget it ever happened, to put the soldiers to sleep and throw away the key. He pointed to the pulsing Terra Invicta glyph. We didn't build a shield. We built a reflex, a last resort so absolute, so final, that we could afford to become the people we are today. Gentle, creative, peaceful, because we knew, deep down in some locked-away part of our minds, that the ultimate punishment was already in place. Commander Velm snarled. You spin pretty tailies to hide your monstrosity. You have unleashed a plague upon the stars. Soo-min turned on him, her calm breaking. We unleashed nothing. You did. You kicked a door you didn't understand, and the alarm inside went off. That fleet didn't attack you. It reacted to you, like an immune system reacting to a virus. She looked at the council, the relay on the Nexus. It didn't send a call for help. It sent a description of the disease. Your weapon signatures, your aggression pattern. Sol Primary received the diagnosis and administered the cure. The council members stirred, their holographic forms whispering to one another. Meanwhile spoke, his voice heavy. The cure, as you call it, erased 23 warships and over 10,000 beings from existence in less than 5 seconds. Without a declaration of war. Without negotiation. And how many beings did you erase at Helios Nexus? Jay asked softly, looking directly at Velm. How many before that? You spoke of finding no gods in the temple. You were wrong. You found them. You just didn't understand that gods don't fight wars. They end them, permanently. The cabin fell silent. The truth of it was chilling. The human defense wasn't a military. It was a law of physics. Violence in this sacred space equals nullification. The council head leaned forward. What does it want? This? Terra Invicta. Jay looked at the star map, at the silent, watchful sentinels. It wants what it was built to want. For the threat to go away. For the garden to be quiet. It is waiting to see if the Rasker attack was an isolated incident or a symptom of a wider sickness. All eyes turned to Commander Velm. The proud conqueror seemed to shrink under the combined gaze of the council and the two humans. The reality of his situation was finally dawning. He had sought to topple gods and had only succeeded in proving they were real. So what happens now? Kellis asked. Their voice small. J looked out the viewport towards the distant pinpoint of Sol. Now we live with the door open. The gods are awake. They are watching. Not to conquer, but to ensure the peace they were built to guarantee. He picked up the Aegis crystal. It was cool now. Its job was done. We have to remember, not the war, but the choice. The choice our ancestors made to become something better than soldiers. The Concord's peace was built on treaties and trade. Ours was built on a promise so terrible we had to forget it to bear it. He turned to the council. You asked what my people are. We are the guardians who forgot we were guards. The Rasker didn't wake a war god. They woke up the custodian of our own worst memory. And the custodian is now watching all of us. The meeting ended not with a decree, but with a quiet, fearful dispersal. The galaxy had its answer, and it offered no comfort. Later, Jay and Su Min stood together at the viewport. Earth was a distant blue star. It's strange, Su Min said. Down there, life is going on. People are having dinner, arguing, falling in love. They saw pretty lights in the sky. They're living the life our ancestors wanted for us, Jay replied. The whole point of the Silent Guard was to make that ignorance possible. And up here? She asked. Up here, Jay said, watching a Concord scout ship give the new Sol Sentinel a very wide berth. We remember. We have to. Someone has to understand what sleeps, and why it must never be fully needed again. The galaxy would change. The Concord's authority was forever undermined, not by a rival, but by a fundamental truth they had missed. The Rasker were broken, their ideology shattered against a reality they couldn't comprehend. And humanity. Humanity was no longer a young species. They were the oldest, the ones who had seen the darkness at the end of war and had built a wall against it, then built a society on the sunny side of that wall. The temple door was open. The awakened gods within did not stride out to claim dominion. They simply stood in the doorway, a silent, unmoving reminder etched against the stars. They had shown their power not to rule, but to warn. The message was clear, simple, and final. You may live in peace. You may thrive, argue, grow. But bring your violence to this threshold again, and you will be quietly, utterly removed from the story. The slumber was over. The watch had begun. And for the first time in millennia, the universe felt both terrifyingly large and terribly, terribly small.